You don't need to slow down. You actually need to stop. This is a reality that many millennials and Gen Z are coming to grips with. Millennials and Gen Z, or Mil Z as a cohort, are faced with the harsh realities of hustle culture. And the result of that is a generational cohort that is bogged down with burnout. Pervasive tropes and culture would tell you that the way that you navigate hustle culture is by balancing, by spinning all the plates at once and multitasking and learning how to juggle. But that's a lie. We were never intended to work around the clock and always be in contact and constantly have the barrage of media and messages, group chats and voice notes, and all of the other things that are bombarding us, not only within work culture, but also in our personal lives. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. You cannot balance it all. That is not real. And the only way to manage hustle culture is to actually stop it. As a busy executive in brand and cultural strategy, and someone who's also building my own personal brand and pushing out more content, I know what it feels like to be swept up by hustle culture, to feel like you have to make more things happen in 24 hours and there's never enough. Then you can never do enough. You can never actually feel at rest based on this drive to always be productive and always be in the pursuit of things. And I'm learning that the real solution to navigating and managing hustle culture is not to try to facilitate better balance or even slow down at times. It's actually to stop and create rhythms around rest that are productive for not only the need to be successful, but the need to connect with others, but most importantly, create space to connect with oneself. On this episode of Make the Way, I want to talk a little bit about some of the harsh realities around hustle culture, how millennials and Gen Z, or Mil Z as a cohort, are pushing back on hustle culture, and ultimately some of the ways that I'm working to navigate hustle culture in my own life and how I'm creating some distinct rhythms that I hope will help you in your journey as well. So let's dive in. Welcome to Make the Way, the culture podcast where we decode culture in real time. I'm your cultural guide and guard, Mike Fair, and I'm excited to be with you for another episode of Make the Way. This week, we're talking about hustle culture. We're talking about the false narrative of balance and ultimately how having a distinct relationship with actually stopping and resting is the real solution to pushing back on hustle culture. As you all know, I love to start with definition and data. And according to the Arizona State University Humanities Project, hustle culture is defined as an intense focus on productivity, ambition, and success with little regard for downtime and self-care. They describe the foundation of hustle culture being directly connected to the entrepreneurial boom of the early 1990s and 2000s. This is when the go hard or go home mindset emerged, with many applying an always on mindset or approach to the ways that they work. This was not only critical within the entrepreneurial set, but absolutely related to corporate America. Coinciding with this was the digital boom as well, the emergence and prevalence of mobile phones and email accessibility and all of the different systems that have turned work into an always on endeavor. In the end, it's resulted in a culture that believes that work should be ever present. A 2025 article from talent and recruitment leader Monster states that 80% of millennials say that hustle culture leads to burnout and health issues, and 60% of Gen Z agree. Across the board, millennials and Gen Z believe that hustle culture is unnecessary and harmful to their well-being, with 68% of millennials and 54% of Gen Z saying it's no longer worth the toll that it takes. As a card-holding millennial who works in a competitive and challenging, I would say, field that is built around both a deeply analytical approach, but also a creative output, I innately understand the pressures of a hustle culture, the realities of very early mornings and late nights to make it all come together. And I'm not saying that there's never a time where that isn't necessary or a part of the process. But what I will say is that it can't always exist in that form. We can't always be on. We can't always be in the constant pursuit of the next deliverable and the next meeting and the next output. We must create rhythms of rest. And I don't think we're talking enough about how we create a practice around the management of hustle culture. How do we create boundaries that allow us to not simply exist within hustle culture, but shape the future of a better relationship with work and a better management of how we extend or offer ourselves to the individuals around us. I think hustle culture can extend beyond work. I think this constantly being on, willingness to always say yes, overbooking ourselves, overcommitting ourselves, that can happen in your personal life too. That can happen in your friendships and family dynamics and with your spouse or the people that are around you, your family and friends. And so I think the idea of rhythms around rest, rhythms around creating space to actually not be productive are critical to both your success in your work and in your personal life. So, I want to talk about a few of the ways that I'm navigating this in my own life and share some of the codes that are helpful in pushing back on hustle culture, whether it's at work or in your day to day. I think one of the things that I'm applying is what I refer to as an interval mindset. And I've leveraged this from just my affinity for working out and thinking of different training protocols. There's a well established idea of doing intense bursts of activity and then taking a real rest. In my professional life, I've been working to apply periods of significant output and then taking a hard rest. That's not me working over the weekend. That's not checking in on a couple things or responding to. No, it's a rest. And I think we have to have, especially when we have intense sprints with work, when we have major deliverables and get through something successfully, we have to rest. We have to take a period of time. And in some instances, that might not be a huge length of time, right? That might be a weekend. That might be a day. But it might mean a week. It might be longer than that if you can afford to. But how do we create a new dynamic with our output? This idea of leaning into intervals is a really nice thought process. If you're doing too many sprints and you don't have that adequate rest time where you aren't doing a drop set, you're not doing something in between, you're not trying to keep your heart rate up, you're actually trying to bring your heart rate down. You're actually trying to get your body back into a moment and an experience of stability. And I have benefited from applying this mindset of an interval approach to the way that I work. And it creates a rhythm that I'm hoping will be very sustainable. It's something that I've been doing over the past, I would say, probably past year or so, but being very calculated about what am I working through? Where am I seeing opportunity for an actual resting point? And it can't be months and months out. It has to be built into the process in a way that it allows me to recharge, that it allows me to recover from the intensity of what it takes to manage the process. So that interval mindset has been critical for me, and it's something that I'm looking forward to applying over time and continuing to unpack how it benefits my approach. The other thing that I have been a huge proponent of in my career, and even more so in my personal life, I'm learning how to do this, but I'm really pushing myself to have more hard nose. And what I mean by that is I think so many times we know inside of ourselves that something is a no. Like it's an immediate visceral reaction to something where you know this is not something that I want to do. This is not something that I'm actually really willing to do. This is not something that I think will benefit me or serve me well. But I think so many times we're not necessarily thinking about ourselves. We're not necessarily prioritizing our own experience. We're thinking exclusively about how that no will impact others. And there are times where, yes, we have to think about the good of the group or the benefit of the collective or community. But there are times where we absolutely should be saying no in service of ourselves. I am doing more work around evaluating where I'm applying a yes and where I'm applying a no. And I'm working to remove a soft no or a maybe, if you will. I want my yeses to be a hell yes, and I want my no's to be a hell no. So I think that is something that takes giving yourself a little bit of space to evaluate versus an immediate response with a yes or no. But it is a valuable exercise to lean into our no's. Don't allow them to be swayed. I think there's something powerful about a hard no and a hard yes. And so this is a practice that I'm constantly working on. I think it's a little bit harder in my personal life because there are times where I want to say yes to something for my friends and family, but I also know where limitations exist. I also know where boundaries need to exist. And so that requires some hard no's, even when it's challenging to lean into those. But I know that I'm better for it. I know that I'm honoring myself when I do that. And ultimately, I think the other people are better for it too, if I'm making those decisions based on the right input. So leaning into my hard nose, more hard nose is something that I'm actively working through. I think I'm pretty good with my hard no for work and professionally. I'm working on that more in my personal relationships. This next code is much more about how we actually push back, how we lean into rest in a tangible way. I have struggled with this so much that even when I am creating room for rest or scheduling rest and creating intervals, if you will, I will fill the rest up with activity. I want to read this book. I want to work on this thing. I want to, I want to listen to these three albums, and I want to, I'll fill the restful period with activity, and that is not rest. That's not it. We have to create space to do nothing. And I'm not saying that every restful period has to be complete absence of activity, but we actually need some moments, some periods that aren't about doing. And I think personally, you need some of those moments and availability daily. I'm trying to start my mornings with just some simple time sitting still. No music, no mindfulness app, no books, nothing. Just allowing myself to have some time within my own experience, within my own mind, within my own body, without all the inputs. And I think as we're scheduling time for rest, as we're creating intervals and creating these blocks of time, where we are preparing for and holding ourselves accountable for rest, we need some periods of time within that where we're doing nothing. So I know personally, this is something that I'm actively working on right now. I'm working right now to schedule a vacation that is absolutely about doing nothing. I want to go somewhere I've already been. I want it to be a easy travel. I want to stay at a location that I already know I'm going to enjoy, and I don't want to do anything. I'm not actually going to plan anything because I know that I'm due for a restful experience that is just that, where I'm not packing the time with so much activity or so much ambition around the rest, trying to make it meaningful that I'm actually just staying in a mode of production. I want to encourage you to create space to do nothing. Foster some moments of pure silence. Create some pockets of time where there is no activity, where we're not doing the spa day and reading the book and catching up on the podcast. Like, how do you create some time and some blocks of time that are just about doing nothing, just about creating some open space to truly rest? So to recap, we talked about some really clear and tangible ways that we can push back on hustle culture, that we can push back on this false narrative that we got to balance it all and really lean into periods of rest where we stop the production. We talked about leveraging an interval mindset where we have our periods of work and sometimes even intense work and output. And then we have periods of time where we are absolutely resting, where we aren't doing anything in that break period. We also discussed having more hard no's, really creating the opportunity for our yes to be our yes, but not creating space for a no to become a yes. And we talked about the significance of that, not only in our work or professional life, but also within our personal life. And we also talked about in application how we make our rest meaningful by creating space to actually do nothing. So I hope that this conversation was helpful. I hope that you are thinking about rest in different ways. I hope you're thinking about pushing back on hustle culture in new and dynamic ways as well. And I want to encourage you to subscribe to Make the Way. I'm so passionate about this community, the ways that we're making the way, whether that's through brand strategy and cultural strategy, but really just spending time together, unpacking and decoding culture. I appreciate you being on this journey with me. I hope that you will subscribe, that you'll share this with someone that you think would appreciate this content. And I look forward to being with you on the next episode of Make the Way.